Hi, Alex.
Good morning, Barbara. Tell me about this Masters of Urban Design.
Okay, so the Masters of Urban Design is one of our new graduate programs in the College of Architecture and the Built Environment, and it builds on expertise that we already have in the College of Architecture and the Built Environment at Jefferson. We just recently launched our Institute for Smart and Healthy Cities, which is a transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary endeavor focused on research, education, and innovation to advance the urban environment. And it's an endeavor, a transdisciplinary endeavor between three colleges at Jefferson. It's the College of Population Health, it's the College of Design, Engineering, and Commerce, and it's the College of Architecture and the Built Environment. And along with the Institute for Smart and Healthy Cities, we opened, or we are going to open in the fall next year. We're currently recruiting for the program. We are going to open a Masters of Urban Design focused on future cities. So this is a very distinct Masters of Urban Design that really focuses on educating the next generation of urban designers, architects, and researchers in the development of sustainable, healthy, and smart cities and communities. It's not only smart cities, but future cities will have a lot of aspects of smart cities. It became a big part of this. So we're looking really at that. So many people are moving into cities. The global population is projected to be 70% urbanized by 2050. And these demographic shifts, they are actually set against a backdrop of extreme environmental challenges relating to climate change and resource depletion. They pose a profound challenge for future cities. So we are looking into, we are developing currently this program based on these assumptions and training and educating future architects and designers and researchers to really think about these new types of cities that we need to develop in these more threatening environments enforced by climate change, by rapid urbanization and carbon, the climate change based on too much carbon in the air. We are proposing this program, and we are looking into developing this program with a unique focus on these pressing contemporary issues to develop urban resiliency and carbon neutral communities, and to harness the potential of smart technologies to achieve environmental wellness on multiple scales in response to rapid urbanization and climate change. So this combination of both the Masters of Urban Design together with the Institute for Smart and Healthy Cities, which really is, the Institute is really the merger thesis of the merger of Thomas Jefferson University and Philadelphia University, which 3 years ago took place, and we brought together the different health disciplines at Thomas Jefferson University with the design and business disciplines at Philadelphia University. So it is really, the Institute grew out of this, that we really have to look at the urban environments as a potential risk for people on their health in terms of air pollution, transportation, in terms of access to green areas, in terms of rapid urbanization, climate change, and all of that, and really look at that combination of the physical space, urban spaces in response to health of its citizens. So that's what the Institute for Smart and Healthy Cities does. And in response to that, the Masters of Urban Design focused on future cities really ties into this merger thesis, and really focuses on the development, obviously not only on new cities, I mean, that's a rare situation, but also the further development of already existing cities into what does the future offer for these cities. So, and how do we integrate smart technology and smart planning into this process? So that's in a nutshell what this program is going to be. We do have, as you may know, already a Masters of Science in Geospatial Technology for geodesign. And so what we are looking at is that the Masters of Science in Geospatial Technology for geodesign is really a technology-focused master's that caters to urban designers. But now we really have the urban design program as the one that really focuses on designing these spaces. So some of the courses overlap here in the curriculum. So we do have urban analytics and data visualization courses that are where students are together in both degrees, but it really gives students in the Masters of Urban Design a unique skill to really differentiate themselves when they come out of the college with a degree with a Masters of Urban Design, to be able to base their decisions, their design decisions, on evidence-based design.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just want to ask a general question, because I mean, it seems that with climate change in particular, but maybe just maybe this is just a trend in education in general, there just seems to be more multidisciplinary tracks. Is that something you've seen? Is that I mean, did it used to be that architects were more siloed and just doing architecture, and that this is more a holistic view of things? Is that a trend?
Yeah, I think it's not only a trend. I think this is the future. It's what is now necessary and what will be the future, not only for our field, but I think in general for, and I think this is what universities are more and more discovering, is that we need to get out of our silos. We really need to think about how do all of these different systems interact and influence each other. And we need to work together. So in our case, we have always been very interdisciplinary at Thomas Jefferson University. Our students, when they come to Thomas Jefferson University, do have a very unique education where they work in whatever major they are, whether they are undergraduates or graduates. They always have the opportunity, or we offer them plenty of opportunities to work together, to collaborate together with designers and professionals, or young professionals in other disciplines. For example, when you think about the building when you think about the design and the construction of a larger building, you have not only one architect, you have several architects working on it. You have interior designers working on it. You have landscape architects, you have engineers, you have a whole set of professions that are working together in order to really design, construct, and build the building. And that's what we are mimicking at Thomas Jefferson University, my college, where students have that same opportunity to work with students who are in another discipline in the architectural fields to learn about that and to work collaboratively on projects. We have a really interesting joint project, collaborative project in the at the graduate level, where we put different disciplines together, whether we have construction managers working with real estate development students and sustainable design students, or we have architecture students working with interior architecture students and with sustainable design students. So it's that mix of disciplines that really comes to a much more complex solution for a design problem. Mm-hmm. Right, and so we're very proud of this. But what we are now discovering, and this is really what is for me so amazing about this merger, is this opportunity to work not only within our own field, but to now get the input from, for example, somebody who is in public health, right, or population health.
That seems huge. It's
amazing, yeah. And that is really what I think makes such a difference when we work with our students. The perspective is so much broader and the input is so much broader that they're getting. We're working with occupational therapists, for example, in interior design, or we sometimes work with completely different disciplines. We just recently worked with the Center of Autism on a neurodiversity symposium, so with our interior design program. So I think there's a real what we are now doing is really go beyond our own discipline and base it on the experiences and the the research that other disciplines are doing, and making that part of our own design processes, and really working collaboratively across disciplines. And this new Masters in Urban Design is very similar to that. It will have, for example, we have an opportunity for students to come into the Masters of Urban Design and get a concentration in public health. So which is when you think about it, knowing the science, the methods and the methodologies of scientists, right, to do research, and knowing what somebody in public health would consider social determinants of health, for example, and how that impacts the well-being of human beings. And a lot of that has to do with the built environment, right? Whether it is, when you think about a city, for example, or a community, access to food, how do you design a city where everybody within walking distance has access to education, health, food, kind of major components of your daily life, right? And unfortunately, Philadelphia is a city where, even though it's very walkable, many areas are food deserts. So it's very devastating for people who live in there, and to not have that access. So we work with, as I said, whether it's the Masters of Urban Design or whether it's the Masters of Architecture, that opportunity across all of our graduate programs, we always seek that collaborative approach to designing and to working across not only our own disciplines, so not only interprofessionally, but also transdisciplinary with other disciplines.
And just so I'm understanding too, so the Smart City Institute, that is not that's kind of like a think tank.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's a think tank for research predominantly in the area of smart and healthy cities, where we are bringing individuals, researchers, professionals, corporations, cities, city managers, etc., together to study smart cities and the impact on health, or smart and healthy cities. So both the connection between really focusing on urban environments, the development of future urban environments, but the future of what is it when we, for example, we all know e-cars are coming, autonomous cars are coming. What impact, for example, does that development have on the near future of our cities, when a lot of the parking spaces will become available? Because if you think about a car, the current model of our car, a car sits 95% of its time in a parking space somewhere, right? With sharing the society that's sharing cars, I mean, the Uber of cars, or the whatever other companies will be developed, the Lyft, etc. You will have, or other companies that actually will drive on or will jump on this train, you will have we will probably move towards a model, or we're thinking that we're moving towards a model where we don't have cars that are sitting somewhere that are owned by a person, but where you have cars that are autonomously driving. They will be driving the whole time, so, or with very little interruptions, maybe only to be charged, but where we would have less cars on the streets, and through that we won't have all the parking spaces, at least not the number of parking spaces that we currently have in cities. So that's a huge opportunity for cities to really think about, how do we further develop these large spaces that are currently, I mean, obviously they're used in cities, they're big money makers, otherwise there would be, you would have a building on it, right?
Yeah, they'd have parks. But
they're eyesores oftentimes, right? Yeah. And so there's a huge opportunity what we're going to do with that. I do think that obviously the pandemic that we have right now is a main, I think we were propelled into the future by probably 5 or 10 years, right? Just with the increase of technology, the working from home at this point, for many people, I don't think these things will go away. And I think it's part of what the future of cities would have anyway looked like, but now we're really there already. And with that, you would think about how much office space do we need in a city? What are we going to do with the access office space, right? What are we doing with, will we have a continued trend of people moving to suburbia that we just saw this year, right? Because people wanted green space, etc. Or we will see the reverse trend back where people are moving into cities if cities can offer what suburban areas offer: green space, great schools, access to food, to hospitals and to doctors and all of that within relatively convenient, in a convenient way, right? And I think that is something that we will see. There will be huge changes over the next coming 1 to 5 years based on what we saw in the pandemic. That will have a huge impact on our cities. And part of that is the Institute for Smart and Healthy Cities. Part of this is to study these impacts, but also to have our students that are getting into the Masters of Urban Design, giving them opportunities for research and to work with faculty on research grants or research studies that are pertaining to the development of smart and healthy cities.
You know, I kind of want to ask this on a personal level, but it's really a professional level. When you're dealing with something like population health, what have you had any eye-opening experiences when you're bringing these new disciplines in that have made you rethink things or added a dimension to things you've already been thinking?
I think it really added a dimension of metrics to it. I think we, as as an architect, I think we know of what impacts, which parts of the built environment, how do they impact health. We know that a house that is moldy is going to impact your health, right? We know that if you can't walk to a grocery store within, I don't know, let's say a 15 minutes radius, walking radius, people will eat from the store, from the whatever gas station that just has cans and some or some other food that is not healthy, right? Or they will buy food at the McDonald's around the corner, right? And they eat fast food. So we know these kind of things, but what population health has brought to us is to really look into the social determinants of health and how they impact the well-being of human beings. And what we are now able to do is putting metrics to that in the collaborations with our population health colleagues, and really pinpointing to what we need to do as architects and urban designers to bring change, and how do we need to advocate for that. I mean, we are oftentimes not in a position to just say we're going to bring that change to this neighborhood. I mean, we all want that, but there are politics, there are owners, there are property owners, there are communities, etc. I mean, there's a whole group of stakeholders involved here. But what we can do is we can advocate, and we can advocate now with numbers. And I think that is and we can bring in our partners, our colleagues, right, into the discussion. For example, we have done something which is really interesting. I just offered a secondary appointment to a colleague from the College of Population Health. Professor Dr. Boras McIntyre will have a secondary appointment in the College of Architecture and the Built Environment. We really want this collaboration between the scientists that are actually looking at the metrics and the outcomes of whatever changes we bring to the environment, and the outcomes in terms of people with, that are having illnesses like diabetes or some other illnesses, or cardiovascular diseases, pulmonary diseases, etc. And how are they linked to the built environment? And what can we do in our advocating, but also in our role as architects and urban designers or interior designers in bringing changes to the environment. Mm-hmm. And that's an incredible, I think for us, it's an incredible benefit in this case of our merger, and which brings a lot of new knowledge to our—
The overlap between smart cities and future cities, they're very aligned, obviously.
Yes, I mean, I would say that future cities obviously are always going to be smart. There's always, the technology is always going to be increasingly involved, certainly. right? I do think by 2030, we will see the majority of our cars will be e-cars. At that time,
that's soon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that the new government that's coming in, we will see tremendous changes. I mean, just to give an example, you might have heard it that I'm German from my accent is German. Germany's in 2020, Germany for the first time, 25% of the newly registered cars were e-cars.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think that in Europe, it's definitely moving forward. There's a lot of subsidies for it. I bet we will see that in the United States. I mean, I haven't seen a program yet, but if you look at Biden's ambitious plan for climate change or to combat climate change, I think this will come. And I think if you look also at numbers, Smart City Dive or some other resources, e-cars are definitely going to replace regular cars, and within a relatively short amount of time. And I do think that though autonomous cars at this point are not regularly on the market, I think there will be a breakthrough in a relatively close future. I also think that if you look at Lyft and Uber, they're actually building new hubs in cities for drone transportation centers. So you will actually see, you will see in a relatively short future, next 5 years, you will see drone transportation in cities, right? So, and that's for both human transportation and for delivery. These are huge changes. They're almost as, I would say, they're maybe even much more far-reaching than the changes at the beginning of the 20th century, when the horse carriage was replaced by the first cars, and within 10 years you had no horses on the street. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think that's the same. We are going through exactly a very similar revolution in the moment that really has huge impacts on designing and building cities and further developing cities. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot that's to be said about this. That is obviously that involves a lot of big thinking, a lot of collaborative transdisciplinary thinking, bringing in engineers, bringing in transportation engineers, bringing in infrastructure engineers, bringing in people from the health sector. So it's really that I think that we are at a point as a profession where we really need to have that outreach to really understand the bigger complexity of all of these things, and to bring in system thinking, to really understand how all of this actually works together and is driving our cities. Yeah, well,
it's necessary, especially now, again, given climate change. It's when these first revolutions were happening, there wasn't really thought about what things were going to look like in 50 years. I don't think. I think it was more like, let's build out what we need right now. I mean, mm-hmm. I think the thinking was, well, this is the future, but maybe now we're approaching the future considering the consequences more carefully.
I actually think that if you look at that time in the 1920s and 30s, you do see that architects at the time were thinking about the impact of the car and the impact of the higher mobility that was possible, and the possibilities and opportunities right now to be disconnected from work and where you live, right? So if you look at the plan for Paris of Le Corbusier, for example, right? So you see that really at this time, that architects and urban designers at the time were absolutely thinking about what's the future of the city, how are cities going to look like, right? And I could just go back into the 1920s and 30s of all of those revolutionary architects and urban designers who were thinking about at that time, the cities were dirty, filthy, poor. People were living under circumstances that would actually create environments where people had tuberculosis and some other, you remember there was the Spanish flu at the time, etc. So cities and urban environments were breeding grounds for diseases. They were terrible, terrible breeding grounds for that. And at that time, architects really started thinking about what are alternative solutions for this. So the Gartenstadt the Gartenstadt was actually developed as an idea and also built, right? So I do think that we are at a similar point right now where the old model of the city that is accessible by car, where you live outside in suburbia, driving into the city for work, I think we will look at this in 20 years and just say, well, that's really the past right now. We're living now differently.
I hope that's true.
I think that's really where the revolution that we're seeing right now with e-cars, autonomous cars, automation of delivery and all of this I think it will lead to a very different environment. What that environment is going to look like, I don't know in the moment, right? That's part of the research that we will be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's we talk about like the eyesores of the parking lots, but that's just, as you said, they generate a lot of money. And it's sort of like, how do you plan the city with the unforeseen things that capitalism might be looking for? Do you know what I mean? Like we need more green spaces, but there's not a lot of money in green spaces.
That's very true. Yeah.
So,
and I think that is in the United States, which is a capitalistic society compared to, let's say, let me take Denmark. Let's take Copenhagen, for example. Copenhagen is at the forefront of smart and healthy cities, right? It's an old city, but they were able to really truly transform the city in the last 10 or 15 years. They have biking lanes everywhere. They have their own bridges and infrastructure projects for just bikes, so that you can actually get from A to B in a really fast way, just using your own, e-bikes, right, or bikes. They have invested in green spaces, public spaces, etc., and a public infrastructure where people want to live and can live very healthy lives. And Denmark is one of the, as you know, one of the highest life expectancies in the world. So. But they also have a different political system, right? It's a social, what's it called? Soziale Marktwirtschaft. No, I have to actually think what it is. A social economy, is that what you call it? I think it's called a social economy, right? So an economy and a political system that values projects and goods and for everybody. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's much more difficult in a capitalistic society, and also where decisions are where property and owning property is drives those kind of decisions. But I think that policies can drive it, certainly. I think that the cities can. You can drive it through subsidies, you can drive it through tax abatements, you can drive different things through these kind of monetary tools and instruments that we have in a capitalistic society. That being said, I do think there are these opportunities. We would have to think about a parking lot that is owned by somebody who makes more money with a parking lot than selling it and putting a building on this. So how can you motivate somebody to where that person who owns it is satisfied at the same time as the public is satisfied, right? We can also think about buildings as green spaces. We have now more and more buildings that have green spaces within, right, as large publicly accessible or only privately accessible green spaces. We even have one in Philadelphia. This is, I think it's called the Sierra building, right? So where you have a green space on top of a building. So that is publicly accessible. So that's also something to take into consideration. Why do green spaces always have to be on the ground? Could you actually develop a site to where, which is a former parking lot, you to develop this in terms of whatever building and infrastructure goes there, but there's green space that is accessible for the public, right? So I think these are all things that that could play a role in reusing and reclaiming the spaces. They're certainly of high value, but at some point, I think we will have to consider this, because I do think that the parking garage and the parking space, the parking lots in the future are a thing of the past. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah, and I mean that will drive the parking lots out. If there's less of a demand for them, then they will go to what is more profitable. So the technology,
I mean, they might become something else that you might have, like they might become charging stations, or I don't know. I mean, there's whatever. I don't know what the future is and in which way you drive this. I do think the city, of course, the city of Philadelphia in our case, and cities in the United States obviously also have a huge say. And when they actually think about what are these kind of major drivers in the moment that will be that will have a huge impact on the future development of a city, right? And if you think about cities are buildings, green spaces, and mostly spaces for cars.
Yeah.
Right, streets, right?
Yeah.
There's only very little space for pedestrians. So what about if we reverse that? What about if the pedestrian is the one that owns 90% of the public space in a city, and cars only have 10%?
Yeah.
What would a city look like?
Heaven.
Well, exactly. We would all say heaven, right? We would all say, how great would that be?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how great would it be to be able to walk in a city like Philadelphia, to bike in a city like Philadelphia, without having to fear that you're going to be run over by a car, or crash into a car, or you're breathing air that is polluted, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you can see some of these cities already in Europe. You can look at, I mean, Copenhagen, great example. Stockholm, great example. Amsterdam, perfect example, right? This is where really pedestrians and bikers they have the right to, they are the priority of the city. It's not the car.
Yeah. And you know, it's so I do bike to work from West Philly. It's a 4-mile bike ride. And I am fortunate that there are bike lanes for much of it, not all of it, but much of it. And it just so happens that West Philadelphia is well connected to Center City. But yet 13th Street, which is where I bike down, and they have a bike lane. Now with the pandemic, they're building temporary shelters for the restaurants to serve people, and that goes in the bike lane. And I just think that the values of our culture, it's the motorist, and then the business owner, and then the cyclist. It's the sustainability. And I come from a family that ran we had a pizza place, so I understand how important that is, but I just think sustainability is always is negotiable. That's the first thing to get cut when things are, when there's problems with trash, they just throw the recycling in with the trash. So it's like it's a value, a shifting of values that is necessary.
Yeah. And I think that is true, but I also do think that these changes, they will automatically come, right? We all know that the world is constantly changing. The world is not going to look like in 30 years and 50 years and 100 years like it does today, right? And I think what is important is to understand what are these drivers and what are the big change drivers here. And I really do think it is it's an increase in knowing today that social justice, right, is a major piece of a major part of a peaceful society. And part of that, what we are talking about, is that when you are in wealthy areas, you don't have all these problems, right? The problems are mostly existing in areas that are underserved, right? Unfortunately, in Philadelphia and many American cities, it's the African Americans communities or the Latino community, Hispanic communities. So I do think that the fact that what has shaped our cities in the last 100 years the most, which is the car, right? But the fact that that is changing, right, is going to change our cities. And I think it's going to change it in a good way, right? As long as we want it to change in a good way. And that we have an opportunity here to really bring to everybody in the city, to bring the opportunity to actually have access to these, to green spaces, access to changing the city in a good way that people can actually live in it, regardless of socioeconomic status or race or ethnic background.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. So we've talked for about an hour. I'm sure there's plenty for me to dig into here. Is there anything else about the program that we should discuss?
About the Masters of Urban Design?
And specifically about future cities.
Yeah, I think one thing that is important is this is a very unique approach. The many urban design programs are very policy driven, but this is really connected to our architecture programs. And so what we're really thinking from the building to the city as how can we develop and design carbon neutral buildings, but also carbon neutral communities and cities. So we're really making that a major aspect, a major driver of this new program. I do think that when I will send you all of the notes so that you can go into this and you can read about it in more detail, what we are thinking about this program. But it is it's a very unique niche that, as far as we know, none of the other programs in the United States offers currently. It's unique in the aspect that we have our currently existing Masters of Science in Geodesign, or Geospatial Technology for Geodesign, short Geodesign, that we have this already existing, and that we can tie our urban design program in an existing infrastructure for urban analytics and visualization. So that makes it very unique. So students that come to this program will require not only excellent design skills, but also the skills to actually do the analytics, the spatial analytics, in order to drive the design process.
Cool, great. Well, it was a pleasure again. Thank you.
Same here, Alex. Very nice talking to you.